Slipstream is arguably the most important mechanic to understand in Grand Races, so much so that the competitive Motorfest racers actually want it nerfed or removed. A player can easily sit behind another and use Slipstream instead of NOS to keep up their subpar pace, and then when the moment's right, usually near the end of the race, blast the NOS they've been saving to pass that player they've been scamming. Now, one could argue NOS is more important, and that's fine. I'm not making this video to discuss the important levels of these mechanics. I'm making it because mastering this Slipstream scam in Motorfest will actually make you a faster racer, and that's what my channel is all about, helping people get faster. Let's go! Real quick before I get into it, if you're looking for any of my Motorfest tunes, you can go to militiagamingco.com, click on Motorfest Pro settings from the top, and you will see all of the tunes that I've made for every single car, and it is updated regularly. All right, let's cut straight to the point with a brief explanation of Slipstream, and then I'll show you some tactics that will have you racing better. Slipstream is a boost in acceleration that the player receives while behind another player in the race. The distance at which this boost starts and how much of an advantage it is different depending on the class of car. Not only does the acceleration get boosted while in Slipstream, but the maximum top speed of your car becomes slightly higher as well. The first thing you need to practice is judging distance. This is the first step to understanding how to fully utilize the benefits of Slipstream. If you're in Slipstream, your car will be accelerating faster than your opponent's, unless he's using NOS, of course. And obviously, if the person in front of you is getting farther away from you, not only are you not in Slipstream, but his pace is better than yours. Now, the main reason judging the Slipstream distance is so important is it allows you to make better decisions while racing. So for example, if you're just out of Slipstream range and you can see the pack ahead of you is all grouped up together, which means they all have Slipstream, you could choose to dump all of your NOS to try and enter that Slipstream range of that pack. If successful, you can then use that Slipstream to keep your pace instead of your NOS, and that will allow your NOS to recover. If unsuccessful though, you will be putting yourself in a much worse position without Slipstream and without NOS, making you a sitting duck for the person or people behind you to catch up. So in this scenario, the most important piece of information you need in order to decide whether to dump your NOS or not is how far away from Slipstream distance are you? Now, judging Slipstream distance is also important when you're in front of another player. If another player has entered your Slipstream, you may not want to use a lot of NOS in an attempt to increase that distance, because again, if unsuccessful, you will become a sitting duck with no NOS, which hurts your pace and allows them to catch you anyways. Instead, I recommend being semi-conservative with your NOS and trying to have your pace without a bunch of NOS be the differentiator. If you stay ahead of them with pure pace, great. If not, and they enter your Slipstream, you should use them to go faster by timing your NOS correctly when they enter drag bump range. Of course, what is drag bump? Drag bump is the boost to acceleration the player in front gets when the Slipstreamer is close enough. The distance at which drag bump is given is much shorter than the distance that Slipstream is given. The amount of boost and the top speed extension is the same for both drivers once drag bump and Slipstream are in effect, which means a pair of drivers can work together to easily keep a faster pace than a solo racer when all three of the drivers in this scenario are semi-close in skill level. If the solo driver is a much higher skilled racer, they can usually just keep a good distance or even extend the distance on a couple people who are working together. SimG does this all the time to me and Steven. Being aware of the drag bump that you give to other players is also important. You should purposely give drag bump to the car in front of you with the higher top speed to increase your own pace. In this clip, I purposely chose to sit behind the other 911, which has a higher top speed than the E30, and we literally pass him and then just walk away. Anyways, I want to go back to that example of judging distance for a moment. It's important to not use any extra NOS when in front of a player who has entered Slipstream range, because as they approach you, you should strategically use a bit of NOS to momentarily match the speed that they have with their Slipstream advantage, which causes them to stay behind you, which in turn gives you drag bump. And now the person behind you has Slipstream and you have drag bump, and the pair of you can keep the maximum pace of your cars. The only time I think it's unnecessary to fight to keep your position is when the car behind you has a higher top speed. In those cases, you can just let them pass and then sit in their Slipstream. Unfortunately, if there's a third person involved in the scenario and the two other drivers both have a higher top speed car, you will be left in the dust if they slipstream and drag bump to get around you together. Alright, if you've made it this far and haven't rushed to the comment section to ask me what the scam part is, even though I described it in the opening of the video, let's talk about how to scam others with Slipstream. There are multiple ways to scam others using Slipstream, but remember what I said earlier about drag bump distance not being as long as Slipstream? Yeah, so a simplified description of how to perform the first tactic is you use Slipstream to gain your acceleration advantage, and then just before entering their drag bump range, you get out of Slipstream and attempt to pass your opponent with your higher pace and or NOS. This is particularly effective near the finish line or car transitions. It's basically the shake and bake from Talladega Nights. The reason I like the word scam to describe it, which by the way I think was coined by Goliath to my knowledge, and you can check out his channel with the link in the description, is because the player in Slipstream can drive much worse and still keep the same pace. Obviously, there's a limit to that, but honestly, the skill gap has to be fairly big, or the person behind has to make a significant mistake for the person in front to walk away from them. And even if the person in front breaks Slipstream with their better driving, two subpar drivers can definitely catch up if they start working together. And that's actually the second tactic, and probably the more useful tactic you should be using as much as possible. Use others to gain a pace advantage with either Slipstream or drag bump, and then attach yourself to the next person in front of you and repeat the process. I call this the handoff. In this clip, I managed to get into Slipstream range of Buelling 47. I then wait patiently for his mistake and make the pass. Now he's directly behind me and giving me drag bump. I use the drag bump to enter the Slipstream range of the next person in front of me as we enter this right-hand turn. Then, upon exiting the turn, I blast NOS to stay in Slipstream, and the unsuspecting Buelling 47, who so generously helped me get close to Mega, makes a slight mistake, causing him to lose my slip, and the handoff is complete. My plan here was then to use Mega to complete yet another handoff into Reptile's Slipstream, but unfortunately Mega makes a mistake and I lose him, which honestly makes a huge difference in this race. If he would have stayed close, we most likely would have caught Reptile, and then it would have been a fight to see who wins. But the distance Reptile had was just too much for my skill to overcome solo. And that's the part that I think is just not right. And it's the part that the competitive community doesn't like. Reptile had a better race than me overall. I really didn't drive well in the beginning of this race, and yet I had a chance to compete for a victory had Mega not made a mistake, which would have been the scam of the century. I think ultimately Slipstream needs to be in the game because it's a real thing that does impact racing, and the same goes for drag bump, but it may just be a little too powerful, which allows players with less skill to stick with players with more. And to be honest, IVT might actually want it that way. From a game dev perspective, creating a competitive environment where more people can enjoy competing against each other despite the skill gap means more people can have fun and feel like they're good. It's certainly a more noob-friendly approach to the game. I guess I prefer people to just practice and get better rather than being given advantages, but that's just me. Anyways, here are the main takeaways of this video. Number one, pay attention to the distance and how your car is acting compared to those around you. Number two, use Slipstream as a way to recover or conserve NOS. Number three, use Slipstream or drag bump to catch players in front of you and then repeat the process. Number four, specifically give your drag bump to the players with the higher top speed. And finally, number five, use NOS to defend your position and then gain the drag bump effect from the people who are using you for Slipstream. Alright, hopefully this has helped in some way. Remember, if you have any questions, you can send me a DM on Instagram or Discord. I read every single message that comes my way. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. Trigger out.